crime fighters. I'm Ray the DA, and this is Straight Talk. I want to talk to you today about a kind of a serious subject because it has significant impact on criminal justice policy. And that is, how do you really determine the real cost of crime? The importance of an accurate determination of the real cost of crime is absolutely critical to an effective formulation of a criminal justice policy which is designed primarily to protect our citizens from these thugs who choose to violate our law. If legislators and criminal justice policymakers ignore the real cost of crime to victims when making their decisions which affect the safety and security of victims, then they are, in my opinion, committing malpractice in representing the citizens who elected them. The safety and security of our law-abiding, tax-paying citizens should be a primary purpose of our government. As it is, the cost to incarcerate these lawbreakers seems to be the main concern of those who are entrusted to make laws for Kentucky. I have yet to see a cost-benefit analysis that compares the true cost of crime with the cost to incarcerate these criminals who choose to victimize our citizens. As it is, typically the cost of crime estimates used by the policymakers and legislators only considers the out-of-pocket losses, tangible losses suffered by victims of crime. For example, if a robbery victim is robbed of $100 at gunpoint, the cost of that crime under the out-of-pocket loss theory is only the $100 taken from the victim by the robber. That's really not an accurate picture of the real cost of crime because it doesn't consider the full impact of crime on victims. It ignores, among other things, the pain, suffering, and crime-induced fear, as well as the reduced quality of life that victims must endure as a result of their victimization. So how did the researchers go about establishing an accurate real cost of crime that includes not only the out-of-pocket losses, but the intangible losses as well? Well, I'll tell you. They included such things as the loss of productivity of the victim, the lost income, the cost of medical and ambulance care, the cost of mental health and counseling services, the cost to police and fire departments for their services in responding and investigating these crimes, the cost of social and victim services to the victims of these crimes, the property loss and damage costs, the out-of-pocket losses, and the quality of life, the reduction in the quality of life. You know, the pain, the suffering, and the fear of crime. So how did they do that, you wonder? Well, to determine the value of pain, suffering, and the loss of quality of life, the researchers analyzed jury verdicts in lawsuits that were filed by crime victims against their offenders. Their comprehensive study focused on that portion of jury monetary verdicts which was awarded to compensate the victims for the pain, suffering, loss of quality of life in order to determine the value of those things, the pain, suffering, loss of quality of life for various crimes. The real cost of crime is absolutely breathtaking. It dwarfs the cost to incarcerate the criminals who commit the vast majority of crimes in Kentucky. When you see these astronomical real costs of crime, you too will understand why, and precisely why, the let 'em out of prison crowd doesn't want to compare the real costs of crime versus the cost to incarcerate the criminals. Those researchers reached conclusion as to these real costs of various crimes, and they are as follows. For example, homicides by assault, for example, total cost about $2.9 million. If it's done by a drunk driver, it's about $3.1 million. Rape and sexual assault real costs, about $87,000 per rape. A serious assault by one of these characters typically costs about $24,000. Robbery costs about $8,000. A drunk driver with an injury to another person costs about $71,000. An arson in which there is an injury real costs about $200,000. Burglaries, about $1,400. And typical thefts cost about $370 each. Now, we looked at the crime that occurred in Lexington during 2012. Let me tell you what the real cost of crime in Lexington for those crimes that occurred in 2012, based on this very good estimate of real costs. Guess what it was? The cost of crime in Lexington was $91 million in 2012. Now, when you compare the costs to incarcerate 1,100 prisoners, which is the maximum of the Fayette County Detention Center for 1 year, 365 days, at a daily cost per prisoner of $60, you get a total cost to incarcerate those 1,100 inmates for 1 year of $24 million. Given the fact that a small percentage of the criminals commit the vast majority of the crime in Lexington, and every community for that matter, it makes great sense to incarcerate these repeat offenders for as long as possible. You see, why should the criminals benefit from the laws passed by our legislature? It seems to me that our law-abiding public is the biggest loser in the comparison of the real cost of crime versus the cost to incarcerate. Is it any real wonder that more and more of the public is believing every day that under our present criminal justice philosophy and state laws, that, guess what? Crime pays. Time to change all that, crime fighters. We need to protect the law-abiding, tax-paying citizens of our state. I'm Ray the DA, and this is Straight Talk.